Well, the last bunch of years, if we wanted to see a major acquisition, we kind of sort of had to wait for, I don't know, March. But the Astros got their marching orders, and that is they want to repeat as World Series champions. And they made the biggest splash of the offseason so far. I'm going to make a big splash today with Locked On Diamondbacks host Millard Thomas. This is a Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On MLB crossover. Let's start it up.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to Locked On MLB. This is the podcast we talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Check out my lower third. You can call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for the last 10 years. And I've now done 4 completed seasons in the Locked On Podcast Network. But I am doing this podcast as I do at least once a week with my illustrious co-host with less hair than the last time I saw him. This Bajikaloop right over there. What's your name, sir?
Yeah, Millard Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks over here. I got the hair, just came back from Jersey, so went to go see Mama, the ultimate hair braider. So she got me done up in some cornrows right now. Got me looking nice.
How would I look in cornrows?
Oh, I think you would crush. I think you look like a young Allen Iverson, Sully, if you got some cornrows.
Oh, well, we talked about practice. We're talking about practice. There you go. Yeah, he never won a ring, did he? He bounced around a little bit towards the end.
No.
I always like it when my stars win rings. I just do. I like stars when they win their rings. Anyway, follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and on Instagram. You could follow me on Twitter. I'm still there. Sully Baseball and Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. What about you, Millard Thomas? Where can they find you?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for my personal account. Look up the show account, Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram, and also please go hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Locked On Diamondbacks on there as well.
Hey, the last bunch of years, I think a big reason is because there's been sort of labor unrest. Remember in 2019, the Machado and Bryce Harper were left unsigned until spring training began. Obviously, 2020 was the lockout, not the lockout, the COVID season. 2021 had the lockout looming and had a lockout for a big chunk of the offseason. This year, there's labor peace, and you can start to see, like, okay, is someone going to sign Judd? Someone going to sign this? Well, we have our first major signing, and it is a big signing for the defending World Series champs, and it is a devastating loss for the Chicago White Sox, and that is Jose Abreu signed a deal with the Houston Astros. It's apparently a 3-year deal pending a physical. But Jose Abreu he was a big star in Cuba, came over to the Chicago White Sox, was a Rookie of the Year in 2014, a wonderful rookie year, won the MVP in the COVID year. Remember, he hit 19 home runs in 60 games. And slugged .617 in the COVID season, has been a consistent all-star and frequently in the top 20 of the MVP count. He was beloved by White Sox fans, played 9 seasons in Chicago, really wanted to win with the White Sox, wanted to be a big part, was on a team that went to the postseason in consecutive years. And, I can understand why the White Sox wouldn't offer him a long-term deal, as he's someone in his 30s. And, players tend to break down, and Andrew Vaughn's ready to go. But he was a big part of this team. And if the White Sox should win, you wanted them to win with him in there. And he's gone. That leaves a hole in the White Sox team and fills a hole with the Houston Astros right now.
Yeah, gut punch to the Chicago White Sox nation. I mean, Jose Abreu was one of the heartbeats of that lineup. So to see him leave, I mean, he's quietly, depending what he does over the next couple of years, like he's going to play his way into like Hall of Fame contention and be on the ballot when he retires, because that's the kind of career he's had since defecting from Cuba. So Jose Abreu has been phenomenal, and the Astros get a really good first baseman here. I don't know when it kind of with like free agency, where it's like it used to feel like MLB free agency started a lot quicker, felt like it used to start a lot faster, but now it's like this really slow drag where even after through the winter meetings, like you discussed that summer 2019, where you see mega free agents still on the market, even up until spring training. Like, I don't know when the MLB philosophy flipped during free agency, because you look at sports like basketball and football, like after the first 2 weeks of the offseason, like all the major free agents are already gone. But for baseball, it's a lot slower. So Jose Abreu is kind of like the first domino to fall this offseason. The White Sox, maybe $20 million was a little bit too much for a player who's 35 and older, and they don't really know where they are as a franchise. They kind of had this window to win over the last couple of years, and they kind of messed it up with all this Tony La Russa stuff, injuries. So maybe they just kind of want a fresh start, kind of retool a little bit. I don't think the White Sox want to rebuild, but I think they do want to retool maybe around those young outfielders that they have. And for this Astros team, like Yuli Gurriel has been one of the cogs on this team since 2016, but you look at his numbers last year, he's really starting to come down. He's 38 years old. So to replace Gurriel at first base with basically Jose Abreu, he's older, but he's still an all-star level player, still one of the league leaders when you look at the advanced hard contact stats. Like, this is a prime example of the rich getting richer. The Astros were able to do it with a potential future Hall of Famer in Jose Abreu.
Well, I'm not going to use the rich getting richer moniker. It's going to be, I'm going to say the strong getting stronger, because I don't think there's, as I said the other day, I'll believe that there's a poor baseball team when I see it. You know, they're all wealthy. They can all sign players like this. This is ridiculous. But the Astros, hey, give Jim Crane credit. Remember I talked about last week, or maybe it was the beginning of this week, about we have to remove the stigma of buying a championship. And Jim Crane, who doesn't have a GM right now, and said, hey, let's sign Abreu. Let's get this guy in. Let's get probably the best available first baseman out there, and someone who you are not asking Jose Abreu to carry this offense. When you take a look at it, you're going to plug without giving up a player. Jose Abreu is still there. Pena is still there. Bregman is still there. Kyle Tucker is still there. Alvarez is still there. You may get Brantley back from injury, who's a great professional hitter. And now you plug in Jose Abreu. He may hit fifth or sixth in this lineup. And, you know, Gurriel obviously was a big part of the 2017 team. He got some hits in the this year's postseason. And then he got injured in that strange play running between third and home. They had acquired Trey Mancini to give them some depth. It didn't work with Mancini, although he made a great defensive play in the World Series. And good for Trey Mancini, who's going to get a World Series ring for his troubles. But I think this is a fantastic move for a team that, you know, wants to put the controversy, what happened before, aside and pile up the titles, you know. And look at, I'm going to talk a little bit this week about bringing up, you know, 2017 on both sides. But the Astros are trying to be poised to be the team of the 2020s. You know, they've already have back-to-back pennants. They already have a title. And imagine for Dusty Baker, you know, after all these years of never winning, they're putting a team around that has to be considered the top bet to win the American League West in 2023, and probably be the team to beat in the American League.
Yeah, their lineup is going to be scary long now. You're going to look at the depth, because Jose Abreu, the type of player he is, with his ability to really draw out at bats, pick the pitches he wants, because he's not just one of those guys that's going to go up there and bat 250 and struggle to get on base. Like, this guy's going to take the pitches he wants to see. He's going to deliver a high contact rate, get on base a ton. So he's just the quality of player that the Houston Astros want in that lineup. And it's going to be really scary to see, because you even forgot like Jose Altuve, who's still basically in the prime of his career in that lineup. And for the Astros, like this was a really aggressive move because there's of course been a lot of rumors surrounding one of their starting pitchers, one of their star pitchers who are on the free agent market about what they're going to do to address that rotation. So it probably didn't feel like first base or going after like a big power slugger in the middle of their lineup was going to be a huge need for this Astros team. But to go out there and get a Jose Abreu where $20 million probably feels a little bit expensive for Jose Abreu considering his age, but I like the fact that it's only a 3-year deal. I don't mind overpaying for someone when it's a short-term deal. And the fact that you're the Houston Astros, you basically have this machine that you built where you could just pick out players and put players in. You could just plug and play all day. And now you're adding Jose Abreu and just dropping into what you already got going. Like, it's just going to be magic over there in Houston with Jose Abreu now in the lineup. And the fact that you take him away from another American League team, I just think enhances the Astros even more.
And I think it enhances their chance to bring back Verlander. I think you're going to see teams like the Mets, the LA Dodgers, the Yankees, maybe the Tigers about wanting to ever reuniting him. I mean, there's a lot of teams who play footsie with Verlander, who is, part of me thinks he should retire. Like, imagine, wouldn't that be the greatest mic drop as a pitcher? Is come back from Tommy John surgery, win your third Cy Young award, and win another World Series ring, and then say, "I'm done, bye, out." But there's too much money to be left on the table there. And if I'm Verlander, you say that may not be the top priority, but one of the top priorities that signing does do, that sounds weird to say does do, but it does tell Verlander, hey, we're serious about repeating. You want to win another World Series title? You're going to go to the chaos that's going on in New York. You want to go to the Dodgers, who always seem to follow a game short, except in 2020. You want to go what? You want to go to the Rangers? Where the hell are you going to go? We're going to win another pennant here. Don't you want to keep playing in the World Series? And like Abreu being plugged into a lineup where he doesn't have to be the star, Verlander's in a rotation. You have Valdez, you have Urquidy, you have Garcia, you have Christian Javier, you have the young Hunter Brown, who looks awesome. I mean, this could be a stacked rotation. And, if I'm Verlander, I'm looking up and saying, hey, look at, they're serious about going back to back.
Yeah, he's got nothing left to prove in Houston. That might be the only reason why he would want to leave, because he already done everything in Houston. Maybe he's entering that Tom Brady zone where it's like, I accomplished everything I can in New England. How cool would it be if Justin Verlander went to a different team like the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Yankees, and then lifted those franchises to great heights and won another Cy Young Award and brought those teams to the World Series? Like, it would only add to his mystique. But at this point, at age 40, like, there's nothing left for him to prove. I guess it just, if he wants to keep adding to his legacy in a whole bunch of different other ways.
Well, look, he's gonna be rich. I don't know much about what's going to happen in his life, but I can tell you, the man is going to get paid. The man is going to get a lot of money. I don't know much about life, but that is the ultimate surefire bet that he is going to earn his money. And if you're going to make any bets, where should you go?
BetOnline.net, baby.
It's your number one source for all your sports betting info, and stats, news, and analysis. You get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football, basketball, the World Cup, and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix in. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. All right, you and I have talked a little bit about, we hinted that there are other high-profile teams that need to make a splash this offseason. The White Sox obviously got kicked down there. They picked up Mike Clevinger, which is an interesting acquisition. Like the White Sox are going to have some pitching depth, provided like the Dylan Ceases of the world don't have a massive relapse. But the White Sox are still going to be a contender, and they won't have the Tony La Russa nonsense hanging over their head. But the Astros putting a planting a flag in the ground for this offseason to say, hey, we're here to win it again, and we're here to be aggressive, should send shockwaves for teams that kind of sort of need to win a World Series to justify their legacy of these last few years. And so, why don't you and I have a couple teams I think just have to make, beyond just putting together a good team, have to send a message to their fan base to say, no, we're going for it too. We're not conceding anything. What team would you say needs to really just kill it this offseason?
Yeah, well, I think this is a team that's kind of like in a weird place right now because this is a team that not this past season, but the year prior, 2021, they won 100 plus games. They overperformed expectations. They got career seasons from so many different players in their lineup. And then this past year, regrets to the mean, 500 team, still talented, but maybe not as good of a season as we thought entering the year in 2022. And that is the San Francisco Giants, who I just am totally confused about this team. They had so many veterans overperform expectations in 2021. They lost the Buster Posies of the world. They lost the Chris Bryants of the world to free agency. You brought back the Logan Webbs. You signed the Carlos Rodon to one-year deals. And now it's like, where are you going from here? Are you letting Rodon walk in free agency? Are you going to sign Aaron Judge and try to be an all-in playoff contender? Like, I'm just confused with this Giants team as a whole. Do they want to be good, or do they want to just kind of sit on their hands and just kind of keep building this thing slowly? I don't know what they want to do. Signing Aaron Judge but letting Carlos Rodon walk would just be mixed messages. So I just want the Giants to get on one clear page and send it to their fan base. We're all in. We're re-signing Rodon. We're bringing in Aaron Judge, and we're trying to win the World Series. Or don't do anything and start to blow this thing up and start to retool, because I don't feel like they have a lot of young talent coming up through that system. And I feel like they could do a little retooling in that front office for the line.
I've said this before. I don't think they were a 107 win team a couple of years ago, and I do not believe they were an 81 team this year. I think they're a low 90 win team, where the balls all dropped in the right place in 2021, and they did it this year. I think that they're right in between. I think that signing Judge would be a huge splash, in some ways, literally, if he's hitting those balls to right field. I think they need to have that message sent to the fan base that, hey, last year was the fluke, not the 107 win season. We're going to go for it. We're going to try to knock the Dodgers when they're vulnerable. And speak of the devil, the Dodgers are in a very strange situation, because year in and year out, they're going to win 100 games. They're going to win 100 games again. And this is probably the swan song for Clayton Kershaw, one of the great, if not the greatest, Los Angeles Dodger of all time, just in terms of a complete body of work. Obviously, Sandy Koufax is going to be looked upon as the greatest LA Dodger, but Koufax's peak was very short. Mm-hmm. I think that the Dodgers, they won the World Series in 2020. They want to have a World Series title that doesn't have the COVID stink on it, to remove them from any comparison to the Bobby Cox Braves. Again, there's no dishonor being compared to a team that had one of the great runs of all time. But that being said, this team really needs a second title. And I'm still stunned that they lost to San Diego. I'm absolutely flummoxed that they lost to San Diego. But then again, I was flummoxed they lost to Washington in 2019. This is a team that, Will Smith, the catcher for LA, hit a drive to right center field in the fifth game of the division series between Los Angeles and Washington that almost dropped in. And if it dropped in, they would have advanced. No one would have remembered the Washington Nationals. And chances are they clobber the Cardinals and we have a rematch with Houston. But that didn't happen. And now you're seeing Trey Turner could leave. Justin Turner could leave. There's all sorts of rumors that they want to bring in this great player, that great player. But they're going to have a lot of money come off the books. Now, San Francisco has a lot of money off of their books as well, which is one of the reasons why those two teams could be potentially scary in the offseason. But they have to stick the landing. They can't go into an offseason where there are a ton of superstars and some in their prime available to be snatched up or re-signed in the case of Trey Turner, and let them walk when they have the financial flexibility to do it. So I think those two great rivals, Los Angeles and San Francisco, have to really make sure that when the dust settles of this off season, that they've made a big splash to show their fans they're going for it, but also, to help with ticket sales.
Yeah, and for the Dodgers, like I'm always confident that they could do something in season near the trade deadline. Go get your Max Scherzers and Trey Turners in one package deal. They're probably gonna have some random prospect come up from the minor league system and be a superstar for them. Like the Dodgers can always find these random talents out of nowhere. For the Giants, I think it's going to be a little tougher for them because if they don't come away with a good offseason, there's a real chance next season at the end of the year you're looking at the standings and you're saying, "Wow, Giants, fourth place team in the NL West behind the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Arizona Diamondbacks." Sully, let me give you another team on my list real quick because I think there's a bunch of teams. Honestly, I think you could just kind of go through the whole AL East and kind of make a case for a bunch of these teams. Like I'm specifically looking at like the Blue Jays and Baltimore Orioles because the
Mhm.
Blue Jays came into last offseason as like everyone's like offseason darling. Everyone thought they were going to win the World Series. You looked at that lineup with the Bichettes, the Teoscars, the Springers, the Vlads. You looked at the rotation stack too. I remember you thought Jose Barrios was going to be the Cy Young Award winner. That might have been the worst miss of the season. We won't even talk about it, Sully,
Nope.
but yeah, will just
No,
move.
I'll admit it. I whiffed on that pick.
That was a
But
tough.
but did you pick Verlander? Let me see. Did you write down Verlander?
I have to go back and see who I might have picked that year. But Blue Jays, I think, are under a lot of pressure, especially after trading Teoscar Hernandez, which is just a deal I really don't understand. Like, it's so easy to get an MLB All-Star. You just trade them a bag of peanuts and say this 16-year-old prospect from Cuba is going to be a superstar in 10 years, and then boom, you got an all-star on your team. Like, it's really crazy how MLB deals happen. So for the Blue Jays, I think there's a ton of pressure considering the expectations that they had last year. They fired their manager. Weird season for them. So I think the Blue Jays are under a lot of pressure, and also the Baltimore Orioles, who were winning all these games last year. Then the trade deadline came around. They said, hey, let's just move off some of our better players because we're not even ready to win right now. What kind of message does that send to your fan base? We're trading away players in the midst of a playoff run. You don't want to send that message to your fan base and players on your team. So I think they need to make moves to show that they're to their fans and to their players, like, we're serious about winning. We're not just going to try to rebuild and tank every year, because where does that get you as a franchise as a whole? So I hope they go out there this offseason actually make moves to try to win games and build toward the playoff race.
Well, that's the reason why I picked the Baltimore Orioles to be the team to sign Carlos Correa. That I think that they will. I think they're going to make a splash. I think there are some major free agents out there, and I think they are going to. And it's not about we're going to sign a couple of pretty good players. They need to get a marquee signing to send the message to their fans that, hey, we're going to go for it, because you saw Baltimore can be a great baseball city. You saw when they were starting to win, they were showing up.
They get
And
rowdy in Baltimore.
oh yeah. Another factor I wanted to bring up about Toronto is obviously they made a ton of moves in the previous year to sort of push their chips to the center of the table and to win what they thought was going to be a winnable division. And the way they lost the postseason, getting shut out in game one and then blowing that huge lead to Seattle and being humiliated at home in that the game where they were up like 7-1, 8-1, something crazy like that, and they wound up losing that game, an elimination game at home to the Mariners. I thought that was going to cost the manager his job. Who's an interim manager anyway, Schneider, and I was stunned that he was able to keep his job. But when you have huge expectations and your postseason ends on such a grotesque note, that there has to be a mission from that front office for the fans to say, okay, we're sorry, our bad. The Yankees are in a very strange position right now. Everything went right the first half of the season, and it looked like the people were saying, "Oh, this is going to be a 110 win team." Like the Giants in 2021, I never believed this was a 110 win team. They wound up being a 99 win team, appropriately for a year with Aaron Judge, number 99. But Yankee fans are tired of making the playoffs and then walking away. There is a stigma to the Hal Steinbrenner era, which is he seems to be fine with it. The Yankees draw very well. They have very good television ratings. The stands they get very good crowds. They sell a lot of foam we're number one fingers and ice cream cups and helmets. They get a lot of revenue from their TV stream because they own the network. So if from a business point of view, there's no problem. There's no problem. Since the last time the Yankees have appeared in a World Series, half the teams in baseball have also appeared in a World Series and not the Yankees. And so they said in the bottom half of recent pennant winners when you stop and think about it. Yankee fans are tired of that. And they're tired of being sold, hey, we're contending and it's a crapshoot. But then you see terrible roster construction from Brian Cashman. I could do a whole series of podcasts about why I find it absolutely bewildering that Cashman still has this job.
Oh yeah.
And not that I think Cashman's incompetent. He's been in there too long. You need to shake the Etch-a-Sketch every once in a while. You need to bring some new blood because this, their analytics they're not cutting it. The roster construction is terrible. And then Aaron Boone, I mean, is he a good manager or not? I don't know. He does what he's told. And I think Yankee fans are tired of it. You hear it all the time. They're tired. They're not satisfied. I think in 2017, when they were probably a year ahead of schedule and got to the League Championship Series, I think they were fine with that year because they thought, all right, they beat an Indians team, and they were the Indians then. They beat an Indians team that everyone in their cow thought was going to win the pennant. And then they wound up losing to an Astros team that was cheating. Okay. And so now they have a window of opportunity to try to, win. And we're now well into the second straight decade without a Yankee pennant. And I think that Yankee think about the rule of seven here. The rule of seven, where the rule of seven is my theory. And I talk about it at the podcast ad nauseum. That is, you start to have your major sports memories when you're around 7 years old. And so with that in mind, if you don't remember a lot of stuff when you're 3, 4, 5 years old of a baseball team, but when you're on 7, that's usually when your first memories of a team. So if you're a Yankee fan who's younger than 20 years old, you don't really have a memory of your team in the World Series.
No.
And that's basically a new generation of Yankee fans who say, keep hearing about our team going to the World Series, 27 rings. Not in my lifetime, not in my memory. And it's getting stale. And the Yankees first went to a World Series in 1921, 101 years ago. They went to their first World Series. Since then, only one manager has managed the team 5 straight years without winning a pennant. And that man is Aaron Boone.
Oh, wow. Look at the fun fact there, Sully.
And Showalter managed them for 4 years when he was let go. And that has a caveat because in the 94 team was probably going to win the pennant when the strike hit. But every other time, whether it's the Stump Merrills of the world or the Bucky Dent or the Lou Pinellas or Bill Verdon, all go down up and down the Yankee roster. If you don't win a pennant in 3 or 4 years, kick rocks, hit the bricks, you're done. And Aaron Boone still has his job. And I think that Yankee fans are a little tired of a front office that says, "What's the problem? We're fine with this. We're fine with this."
Yeah, for the Yankees, I mean, this is such a weird point. I think they're the obvious answer to the question, which team is under the most pressure this offseason. I just felt like we've talked about the Yankees so much. Maybe we just want to avoid them as an easy answer because for this Yankees team, this is quite literally maybe the biggest point in Yankees franchise history over the last decade, over the last 20 years, because what happens this offseason can set up the next 10 to 20 years for the Yankees franchise, for the Yankees lore, for the Yankees institutions, because I don't know what the Yankees stand on anymore. They used to be the bad boys who went out there in free agency and spent money and got the top players. I used to look at those Yankees lineups from the early 2000s where it was like 6, 7, 8 players deep. You had your main rotation starter with 2 or 3 guys behind him that you felt confident in. You had the Mariano Rivera's closing at the back end of the bullpen. You had stars at every other position around the diamond in your rotation in the bullpen for this Yankees team. You weren't ever worried about your best homegrown player leaving, unless his name was Robinson Cano. So for this Yankees team, it's like, if Aaron Judge leaves the Yankees franchise, where do the Yankees go from here? How can they look their fan base in the faces and say, we're trying to get back to the World Series by letting a historic player like Aaron Judge walk? How can you keep bringing back Aaron Boone? How can you keep bringing back Brian Cashman if a player like Aaron Judge walks? So this offseason is huge because this is like a hot seat offseason for the GM. Usually you see these kind of hot seat transactions happen during the season after the offseason with, you know, once you see how the team plays. But if Brian Cashman can't close the deal on Aaron Judge this offseason, that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back as to whether Brian Cashman should even build the team for 2023.
I see, but here's the deal, and this is where Yankee fans will probably kick in. If he loses Aaron Judge, Cashman's still going to have his job. I don't think anything will prevent Cashman keeping his job. And yet, the one time since 2000, the one time in the last 22 years that the Yankees have won the World Series, they did so after opening up their wallet, bringing in Sabathia, bringing in Teixeira, bringing in Burnett, and making sure that the Jeters and Riveras and everyone didn't walk. And they just refused to do that. By the way, I want to bring the last team, and I have mentioned this team a few times, but the Guardians need to bring a bat or two in. I had Bryce Patrick on here yesterday talking about why I think Gallo should return to the Rangers, because he has so much positive, he has so much good blood and good will in the bank in Texas. And the last time Gallo was an all-star, you have to go all the way back to 2021 with the Rangers, come back and, and for a cheap contract, you can bring him back to where he belongs, which is Texas. But he could be an interesting fit in Cleveland, especially because he's inexpensive. Peterson is an inexpensive signing. A professional hitter like J.D. Martinez, if you're trying to get someone to be just a solid bat in the middle of that lineup with that great pitching staff and all that young talent, imagine just plugging in J.D. Martinez. And look, we're not asking you to be a superstar. We're asking you to be almost like a second, hitting coach to be here. Here's how we're going to be professional hitters in the middle of that lineup. You have a guy who's, was an all-star this year, J.D. Martinez. He's not the home run hitter, but he hit those doubles into the gap. And we're all those players, those jackrabbits on Cleveland's roster, to have a guy hitting doubles into the gap might mean an extra run here or there, which might be the difference between winning and losing a game with that tremendous pitching staff and that unbeatable bullpen that they have in Cleveland. I think that it's, quite frankly, the window, we talked about the Astros understanding that the window of opportunity is right now. Cleveland has to know their window of opportunity is right freaking now. With a super young team, you add a veteran with playoff savvy veteran like J.D. Martinez, whose baseball IQ is off the charts. You plug him right into that lineup. Next thing you know, you have a couple extra hits, a couple extra wins, and maybe another division title, and maybe you roll the dice.
Yeah, I think the offseason is so important for the Cleveland Guardians is because of that division factor. You can basically shut down that division over the next few years with a good offseason, because you just look at it right now, like the White Sox just lost their guy, Jose Abreu, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Like, they're severely going to be drained with talent potentially after this offseason. The Minnesota Twins, like, they were a fun story for most of the year last year, but they all of a sudden after this offseason, like, lose a Carlos Correa. Like, that's not going to all of a sudden help them become better after this offseason. The Tigers, they spent a whole bunch of money last offseason, but they seem like a disaster. They had like one of the worst offensive seasons ever by like an MLB team. So the division is there for the taking for the Guardians, where it could be a parade to the playoffs the next 5 years. And if they could build a good team through the offseason, through trades. I like the JD Martinez move, idea maybe more than the Joey Gallo, just not a big Joey Gallo guy, but just your overall point of bringing big boys into that building, veterans who know what they're doing at the plate, guys who could draw out long at bats like a JD Martinez. And he's one of those guys that, when he gets in the lab, he brings others along with him and he rubs off on younger players. Him and Mookie Betts used to sit for hours on the bench and just go over game tape. So I think a guy like JD Martinez, bringing him in the building would be huge for that young roster.
Well, think about that when he had his cameo with Arizona. He was with the Diamondbacks for what, 2.5 months? But in that
2.5 months ever.
But think of how he affected that offense for that team, and that he carried them right to the division series that year. I mean, that was just a phenomenal addition. You saw how he rubbed off on the other hitter. I mean, you obviously saw it with a front row seat.
He's a winner.
And he's not going to take it's not going to cost a long-term deal or anything like that to bring. And that's why I've brought up these players who were recent all-stars like Martinez, like Peterson, like Joey Gallo, who are players who are potential rebounds, potential comeback player of the years, who may just need a change of scenery and bounce back. Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are teams that need to make that big splash.
Yeah, and honestly, you could make a case for like the whole AL East. I mean, the Red Sox, they need like something good to happen this offseason. Like, they're another team. I don't know what they're doing. Tampa Bay Rays, they're just another one of those teams that go out there, win 95 games, get to the playoffs, and just kind of flame out every year in the postseason. So it'd be kind of nice if they went out there and got like some real star potential. Like, why couldn't they go out there and get like a Jose Abreu? Would have been like a perfect Tampa Bay Ray, maybe because of the money. But I think the whole AL East, it's just like offseason chopping block time for figuring out what they need to be next year.
Well, I know what you need to be every day is be listening to Locked On Diamondbacks or Locked On MLB. And by the way, thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen today. For your second listen, obviously Locked On Diamondbacks. Third listen, check out Locked On Sports Today for the games that matter the most and the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And speaking of getting your podcasts, Millard Thomas, tell people where they're going to listen to your terrific show.
Yeah, you can follow me on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music. Follow us on YouTube, Locked On Diamondbacks on there as well. So please hit subscribe. Follow us on all your social media platforms, Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram.
And you can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. And I'm your pal Salim at Solid Baseball on Twitter, Solid Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Talking about those teams that need to kill it and follow the lead of the Astros, who are saying, we're not going to wait. We're going to improve our team right now. This has been a Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover. He's Millard Thomas. I'm your pal Sully. It's time for us to fist bump. See you next week.